What is this thing, hunting, and what does it give you ethically?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it confronts you with life and death.
Yeah.
And with taking responsibility for the death of
Correct.
an animal that you then are going to consume.
This is the Wild Ohio Podcast, where conservation meets conversation.
And Ohio's wildlife takes center stage. Join us as we discuss
Wildlife conservation and outdoor recreation in the Buckeye State.
Welcome to your Wild Ohio Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Phillips, joined by
John Kaufman.
Abby Rodebeck.
And today we have a special guest with us, Greg Hitzhusen. Greg, excited to get into your story, but first a little bit about you. You're an associate professor of professional practice with OSU, and that's over religion, ecology, and sustainability. That is a mouthful.
That is.
It's a lot of words, Greg.
But
I'm in the School of Environment and Natural Resources, and they don't always know what to do with me there. But, yeah,
So you are where academics meets real world?
that's right. Professional practice is supposed to mean that you're using something that we're doing our research on or figuring out, and then figuring out how that matters to real people out there or to people in the professions. So for me, that's environmental education, that's environmental ethics. Increasingly, it's experiential education.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of the philosophy and ethics guy for
You
the
came
School of
to-
Environment and Natural Resources.
okay, great.
You came to Ohio in, 2006? 7?
Yes. I grew up in Ohio, but then I came back in 2007,
That's right.
and Abby was one of my first students.
Oh,
Yes.
Way back in the day. I feel
The very
it's like
first.
old home week
Yeah.
here.
We old.
Getting there.
Getting there.
Getting there.
Well, before we jump into it too much, how's summer treating you? You getting ready?
It's been pretty
Started-
great.
Yeah?
Yeah, I can't complain. So one of the things I teach at OSU is the Iceland Abroad course. So I got a couple weeks
Oh.
in Iceland.
That's cool.
And then my brother lives in Europe and wanted to go glacier climbing in the Swiss Alps. So
You poor thing.
I
Bummer.
joined him. That was really,
So you're doing all
really
right.
rough. Yeah.
John?
Sounds some nice.
you been to
I didn't do
Iceland?
any of that. No, we just actually got back from the great state of Missouri. Went down
Okay.
there and spent some time at Table Rock Lake, and that was a good
How
opportunity.
was that?
The kids enjoyed it very much.
Good fishing?
We didn't. Well, no, we barely fished. We did some fishing. I bought a license just so everybody knows. Caught some sunfish with the kids at the docks, but
Okay.
then they really just liked getting out on the water. That was really good time.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Abby, how about you?
Oh, I've trumped all you guys. I did a week off at home.
That doesn't trump
Nice.
any of that.
Staycations
to do
are a real
lot
thing.
of work projects while Elliot was at daycare.
Did you get a bunch done though?
I did. Now I have a whole new list.
Oh, that's
whole
good.
new list of things to get
yeah.
done. Elliot is in the potty training world.
Oh, wow.
So we did a lot of that.
I don't miss any of that.
I'm going to be excited when it's over.
Yeah, it is. It's nice when it is over for sure.
But it's been good.
Yeah.
You know.
You done anything, Jordan?
Not really.
You know, set up any trail cameras or tree stands?
Getting
just
ready.
last weekend I started to get the itch. I was out looking at some food plots, starting to kind of get geared up for all things deer season. I'm starting to notice the doves a little bit
Yeah, I
more
have been
on
seeing
the
a
power
lot of
lines.
doves.
So it's quickly approaching, and I'm starting to get pretty excited for a little bit of cooler weather and hunting season.
It's right around
all
the corner.
things hunting season.
Very much so.
Yeah. Well, Greg, speaking of hunting
Yeah.
and hunting seasons, you've got a pretty unique story. And I was wondering if we could just maybe jump right into it with a little bit of your family history with hunting and kind of what brings you here to us today and how you got here with us here today.
Yeah. Well, the family history part's pretty easy because it's quick.
Yeah.
There's not much hunting in the background. Or I should say you got to go back a couple of generations. But basically, I think with my dad's generation, he went off to grad school, didn't have time, and hunting disappeared from the family traditions. So I did a lot of backpacking and camping and fishing and stuff like that. But hunting was sort of this thing that, I guess as I grew up in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, and hunting was something that people did that you weren't really sure that you were supposed to be doing that or something like that, right? So anyway, so we've always been an outdoorsy family. I have two sons. One is now going to be a senior at Ohio State, and the other one's going to be a freshman at Ohio State.
Okay.
Oh, my gosh.
We're going to have the empty nest for the first time, sort of, but they're not
More hunting.
Yeah,
More
exactly.
hunting time.
Right. And we used to go to the Ohio State Fair every summer. The boys loved it. And our favorite area at the Ohio State Fair is the DNR, you know. there's
Obviously.
kayaks
As it
and
should be.
Yeah.
There's, you know, like all this stuff, you know,
Well, you got
lumberjack show.
Fishing, BB gun,
Yeah.
aviary,
Butterfly
butterfly house,
Fried fish.
Smokey the Bear
fried
talks to
fish,
you.
Smokey the Bear
Man,
talking
they were
to
like,
you.
oh, you know, Smokey was talking
Same.
at him and all that. Right?
Same.
So we would go there, but he discovered the archery range. This is my older son, Eli. And my dad was with him the first time. I think he was like 6 years old or something like that. And they walked up to the archery range, and my dad loves this story. It's like his favorite grandpa story. And he'll say, well, there's a couple of guys wearing the green shirts and the big beards, you know, these outdoorsy looking guys. They're like, hey there, little guy, you want to shoot a bow and arrow? And Eli says, well, yes, I do. And so they, you know, line him up there. They give him a little bow and an arrow. And they'll aim for the target, little guy. And he, boom, he just nails it. They're like, oh, good shot. You want to try that again? And he's like, yes, I do.
His head
Yes.
got as big as a melon.
Oh,
I'm sure,
man.
right?
So he takes his second shot. Boom, nails the target again. There. Wow, that's pretty great. You want to do another one? Boom, 3 shots in a row. Boom, nails the target. So where does Eli want to go? Every year we
Yeah.
come back to the fair, he wants to go to the archery range.
Yeah.
And so a couple of years later, he was 8 years old. And we're walking out of the fair, and he'd had another successful outing at the archery range. He'd like hit the 3D targets, and he'd hit a turkey in the head, and I think that was his favorite one. There was something about that. He's like, I hit the turkey in the head.
That's
And
awesome.
So we're walking out of the fair. There's a big gate, you know, right there, and I'm about to go under it. And he's like, Dad? I'm like, what's up, Eli? He says, I think I want to hunt. And I don't know. I don't know why this hadn't occurred to me. I didn't see that coming. And I was like, oh. And the first thing that came to my mind is I need to buy time. I said, I'm not sure you're old enough to hunt.
Classic dad.
Classic
Yeah.
dad move.
Right, he's
Yeah.
8, right? I said, I don't think you're old enough to hunt. He says, well, how old do I have to be to hunt? And I don't know.
Scrambling.
Right. And I'm thinking some family in Western New York, they've talked about 12 years old for something. So I said, I think you got to be 12. And he's like, oh. And then I said something like, if you're going to hunt, and my wife is walking nearby. And my wife, by the way, I'll just throw in, is vegetarian, and she's not really into meat, if you will.
Yeah.
But she's like, wait, what are we? Her first thing was, we're talking about guns here or what? She's like, there's not going to be any guns, are there? We're like, no, we're talking about archery.
Yeah.
Archery. I said, and if you're going to be an archery hunter, you got to really be good at it. Like, you're a good shot, but you're going to have to really practice. So if you're still interested, like when you're 10 or 11, maybe we'll have to get you a bow, and then you'll have to really practice. And I'm thinking, he comes up with all kinds of stuff he thinks he wants to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe
Right.
he'll forget in the next 2 months, and this is the last we'll hear about this hunting thing. No, he didn't forget. he
Good
thought
for
about
him.
it. He thought about it all the time,
Yeah.
and sure enough, so by the time he was 10 or 11, we got him a youth bow, and he started shooting. And we used to make bets with him. Oh, I bet you can't hit that apple, and we stopped doing that because he was a pretty good shot.
Yeah.
He would
So
hit
he-
the apple.
He would hit the apple. My mom, particularly, Grandma would bet him. Man, she'd start out at $20, and then
Whoa.
he nailed it, and she was like, "Whoa!" And so then she'd bet him $5.
I've seen
She-
photos of him eating the apple off of the arrow.
Oh,
So
yeah,
he
that's
was,
pretty
it
funny.
was- yeah.
He was living it
Yeah.
up there for a while, until we stopped just giving him money for it. It was like we can't keep doing that.
Yeah.
So yeah, he loved it, and so that was kind of how we got started. Basically, it was like, well, okay, if you want to learn to hunt, I guess we'll do that. And then I said, we're walking out of the fair. I said, and I guess I'll learn with you.
Yeah.
My wheels are spinning right there. Like, well, if this is going to happen, then I'm going to have to figure this out too. So that kind of became our mission for the next couple of years.
Well,
was
it's
figure
a good
out how we're gonna- how we're
bonding
gonna do this,
experience.
yeah.
And it's a great introduction. I think before we get into some of the next parts of the story, because I do have a part in this, so I know where some of this is going. Let's take a quick moment and just pause for a promo.
Wild Ohio Magazine is our award-winning publication featuring Ohio's spectacular wildlife and recreation opportunities. It's ad-free and delivered to you 6 times per year with a calendar edition, all for just $5. Get yours now at wildohio.gov.
Okay, so you've gone to the state fair. He's flinging arrows. He's successful. He's definitely interested.
And he has the itch now.
And now he's,
Yeah.
yeah. So he's been patient.
Yeah.
It is now time to pay the dues.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
Well, one of the main next steps is I start asking around. Right?
Yeah.
So I got colleagues who are wildlife professors in the School of Environment and Natural Resources, and Bob Gates was one
Yep.
of the first I
Great
talked
guy.
to. And Bob then pretty shortly says, well, you should talk to Gabe Carnes, and particularly with the archery. Bob doesn't do as much archery. And so I had Bob and Gabe, and somewhere along the line, Bob says, Division has this Learn to Hunt program. And the first thing we did was a field dressing course, which was taught by yours truly.
Yeah.
So
that was out of the District 1 office.
Yep.
Do you know what year that was? That was a while ago.
Doing some quick math
2015?
here.
Yeah.
That
So
would have been about
11 years
2015.
ago. Yep.
And that was the real test to see if, okay, this idea sounds exciting. Woo, it's thrilling. We're shooting bows and arrows in the yard. He's hitting targets. But now this involves animals. And here's going to be some animals. And I remember you pulled up with the pickup truck and had 3 does in the back.
Yep.
And there's all these people standing there. And I will tell you, the thing I was most fascinated by is that half the people there didn't want to learn to hunt. They were locavores.
Yeah.
Looking for venison.
Yep.
But nonetheless, everybody's kind of standing back, waiting, like, what's going to happen here? And so you demonstrated on one, showed us, how to field dress one, and then you said, all right, who's doing the next? Handed over the knives, and there was this pause, and I'm looking at Eli. I'm thinking, is he going to be the kid who's going to be like, I want to do it, or is he going to stand back? And Eli's always been kind of I'm going to study this first before I try it. So he kind of hung back a little bit, and in my dad mind, I'm thinking, this is maybe going to be the deal breaker. Like if the whole idea of a dead animal is too much to handle, then maybe we're not going to be doing this. But he kind of watched as stuff got gone, deer got hung up, and then it came time to skin the hide off, and he just got fascinated by that.
I remember this.
Yeah. And so we jumped onto one of those does and skinned the hide off, and then I don't remember did he just on his own come up to you?
He did. Yeah. He approached me during this clinic, and this was the first one that we had ever done with the Division of Wildlife. And can I have the hide?
Oh, really?
Can I keep the hide? And I said, we can make that happen, young man. Yes, you absolutely can. So we got him reseated so that because he wanted to tan the hide on his own.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he did. He took it home. He looked it up. He got a kit, got plywood board, all this stuff, and he got to work right away and tanned
Pretty
that
cool.
hide. He's still got it. He's done it
Greg,
with
before you
several.
get too far into that, quick question to go back a bit. With your background at OSU, talking about ethics and teaching that to other people, I assume you and Eli had a conversation maybe before that clinic, or what was that like?
So I'll just say that having grown up not hunting, and I'll even say my grandfather was a hunter, but not doves because they were a symbol of peace.
Okay.
And a couple other things like that. So there were these interesting sort of family quirks from it there. And my dad always just sort of had the idea that, we're not going to hunt kind of thing, right? But when I was doing my doctoral work in natural resources, environmental ethics, a friend of mine had done his dissertation on hunting ethics.
Okay.
And I might say a little bit about that later. But his basic idea was, what is this thing, hunting? And what does it give you ethically?
Yeah.
And it confronts you with life and death.
Yeah.
And with taking responsibility for the death of an animal that you then are going to consume, you're going to eat. It's going to be food on the table. It's going to be meat in your freezer. And at least intellectually, I had gone through this whole set of thoughts and arguments linked into the sort of whole field of environmental ethics, if you will, that I could intellectually say, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
Hunting ethics makes a lot of sense. But I also did have a conversation with them. There's a difference between what I might call hunters, or my friend Jim Tantillo would say, there's hunters and then there's shooters. If all you want to do is shoot something, including beer cans and everything else, that's not the same thing that we're talking about as the hunting tradition that passed down from parent to child.
Absolutely.
All this kind of thing. So we had a little bit of conversation about that. But in all honesty, I wasn't entirely sure how this was going to play out for me either, right? Because there was this one moment that I used to tell the story, and I don't know, Abby, if I ever told stories like this in class or not, but for my own ethical development, there was a moment where my brother and I had learned to shoot our BB guns. We did have BB guns growing up, and mostly it was target practice. But my grandpa on the farm in Iowa had set us the task of shooting the sparrows out of the eaves of his, wiring and stuff like this. So I came home thinking, you shoot these little birds. I went out in the backyard.
You just started.
And went looking for a sparrow and shot this bird. And I was flush with, I got it. I was like, look at that. What a great shot. And I came up and looked down on the ground. And there was this little bird laying there and it wasn't a sparrow. I don't know what it was, but I'm sure it's a bird that shouldn't have been shot.
That's we get that story a lot as game wardens.
And
I don't know what it is, but maybe you can help me.
And it was so cute. It was so beautiful, this thing. And I literally, at that moment, I don't know how old I was, 10 years old or something. And I thought to myself, that thing is only dead because I decided to shoot it.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, I don't need to do that anymore. Right? So, and that had been really important to me, to note that I had that power to decide to do things like that or not. Right? So here I am thinking, wait, what is going to happen to me when I'm thinking I'm going to shoot a deer? And that's not a bird.
Yeah.
That's a mammal. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen in that moment.
And that's a big jump. We haven't really talked
Yeah.
about this a lot.
I thought the
but
same thing when he said that.
yeah.
The jump in hunting from going from a bird to our largest mammal for hunting purposes, which is the deer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge jump to prepare yourself both with, accuracy of your firearm or your bow and being proficient so that you can ethically dispatch and harvest the animal as quickly as possible. But it's a heavy situation when you walk up on a harvested animal of any kind, but a deer kind of weighs heavy within that. Like, holy cow, we have done something here. And
Would you say it's fair, like, especially when you're new to hunting, you don't necessarily know how you're going to feel about it until you're in the moment?
Oh, absolutely.
You've got tons of stories
Yeah.
about that. I've got
I
tons
have.
of stories when you take new hunters and that initial reaction you've learned.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't know how they're going to react.
You have no idea how anyone's going to react, and they don't know how they're going to react until
Right.
the time comes. And each time, even with, there's still times that I'm able to harvest, and I have a different reaction to the harvest that was not something that I thought was going to occur. So,
Well, that's one of the things one of my hunting mentor, Bob Gates, had said to me. Why are you guys going for deer right away?
yeah.
The honest answer was, because we don't know what we're doing. He's been to
I
the
didn't know
shooting
there was
range.
another
You think that's
option.
cool, and you hunt deer, I guess, in Ohio, right? And he's like, why don't you start with squirrels or something small? But deer was in his head. Like, that's what we were after.
We see that.
I
We
wasn't
see
going to
that
say, hey, let's
so
go for
much. Folks want to fill their freezer.
Yeah.
That's adult onset. You're an adult onset. So a lot of the programming that we focus on is adult onset hunting.
Which means?
Yeah, let's define that real quick for our
So
listeners.
you're talking about the heritage and the tradition of hunting. So a lot of folks are older in age, so outside of college, they've gone through school, they maybe have settled down a little bit, or they're in college, but they didn't come from a hunting family. And they're getting out on their own, and deer is a lot of protein. So they think, well, if I can just get proficient at this and I go out, I can get 45 pounds of venison, fill the freezer, and it's a whole lot cheaper than beef. That's to be debated, but it is a wild protein. And there is something that is very pure about knowing where that freezer is getting filled from. And it's very fulfilling. It's a hunt's remembrance with each meal for a lot of folks. But a lot of people that are adult onset, getting into it at that later age, are thinking about it with the mindset of as much bang for your buck, no pun intended, in going into this endeavor, where if you come up as a tradition with that, usually you're going to start with that smaller game and you're going to build up, because why would you go for the pinnacle of hunting in the state of Ohio right out the gate? Because the concern would be that they're not ready, they're not mentally ready to walk up on a creature that really it's a heavy situation.
And a lot of our adult onsets are just like Greg's story. This is why this story is so great. Like you said one time in our episode, you grew up hunting adjacent. Maybe you have some exposure, you understand it, you've heard of it, whatever. But whereas my dad hunted, my grandpa and granddad hunted, like we had that tradition in the family. It was kind of assumed that we were going to hunt, and it's a different place. You come into it from a different avenue, so it's great.
I think I was faced with being a dad, trying to do something that my son was so clearly excited about.
Yeah.
And it was clear that if I said, well, let's go squirrel hunting, that was not going to capture his imagination in the same, because for some reason, deer had already been, that was the goal.
Yeah.
So, but I had, a lot of people looking out for me, trying to help this be a good experience. And the way it actually worked out that first season, the biggest question ended up being, where are we going to hunt?
Yeah.
And it just so happened, my folks had a property on a ravine in Columbus, and I talked to the wildlife officer for Franklin County at the time, who looked at the map with me and tried to figure out, what would it be? Can you legally hunt that? And the answer was yes, but you're probably going to have to ask your neighbors if you can retrieve, because in all likelihood, deer
I
will
think
end up on
John should talk to this a little bit, but there's
might have been taking note of that.
city ordinance, and then you also have the retrieval process.
Yeah.
So just because you can hunt within the city ordinance, and each one's going to be different, you to retrieve have to have permission. So if if you shoot an animal and then it goes onto someone else's property, you cannot trespass onto their property to retrieve the animal without permission.
Yeah, some states do actually have a blood tracking rules or regulations. We do not. So out of questions, Greg, how big was the property you were hunting?
like 1.3 acres.
So that's a small parcel.
You're
Anyone
gonna
who's
need to
done any
knock on
deer
doors.
hunting, you kind of have to go in that
Wow.
assuming
Yeah.
assuming that the deer is going to get off of that property.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Jordan, you said it right. You can have permission where you are. You and the deer have to be on that 1 something acres. But the moment it steps off, you have to have permission to go retrieve it. A lot of the times, and maybe you can speak to this, people are open to the idea of you coming to get it, especially if you get ahead of that and talk to them before.
Well, frankly, I had assumed we would, through our friend network, somebody who had a farm or something like that would offer us their land to hunt on, but that just didn't happen.
Yeah.
And then we're like, wait, but my folks live on this ravine and there's deer running through there. And so I had this conversation with a wildlife officer, and his advice was, you've got to talk to your neighbors.
Yep.
And if they are open to you retrieving deer from their property, great, do it. Please do it, because we don't have that many ways to remove deer and
Right.
deer vehicle accidents, all that kind of thing. This is a helpful way to, bring those numbers down. But he said, but if they're against it, if they're just horrified by the idea of, don't even think about it, it's just not worth the hassle. So here was the plan. We made I probably still have a copy of it somewhere. We made a little piece of one sheet page, had pictures of me and Eli target shooting with our bows, had the story. Eli wants to hunt deer and Dad's learning with him, and da-da-da-da.
Awesome.
And my folks, who had lived on that property for 30 years, went door to door to the neighbors and introduced the idea, and they all agreed. And,
That's amazing.
and at least half of them were like, oh, they've been eating my landscaping.
I was just gonna
eating
say.
all my
I was gonna
flowers.
say,
I'd
yeah.
love it if you took
My
a couple of those
hostas.
deer.
How many pictures of deer on hostas did you
Yeah.
use in that?
Yeah, so
Listen.
we got signed permission from all the neighbors. One of them said, you can hunt on our land too. And since it's a ravine, it looks a lot bigger than, 1 acre, just the way that it's laid
Yeah.
out, right? So,
I find the way, how you approach a situation like that really helps drive probably the answer too. So
Yeah.
I think that was a very
Preparedness.
smart way to go
I
about
can't see how
that.
anybody would have said no to them.
No,
frankly.
how do you say no to that? You can't.
So we were all set, but we also, we were just trying to figure it out, and we got a tree stand, and we spent a month seeing no deer, nothing, because we realized slowly but surely, the more people I talked to, we were too obvious, we were
Yeah.
too loud, we were moving around, we were fidgeting, all this kind of stuff. I was still figuring out what the wind had to do with anything, and
For listeners, that's kind of the stuff you learn when you go small game hunting before
Yeah.
you become a deer hunter. Sitting in a squirrel woods is a real quick way to teach a kid and folks to not move so much. Yeah, but it's just a plug for small game.
The funny thing about this was that very first day we sat out there, basically for the first 4 weekends of the season, we sat out there all Saturday and all Sunday. Eli was ready to get something. And the first day, of course, we see no deer, but we see all kinds of squirrels.
Yeah.
And so he asked me after a couple hours, he's like, Dad, can I shoot one of these squirrels? I'm like, I guess you could, but I was like, if you go shooting a squirrel, we may make a commotion, and that might scare away any chance of deer. I was like, I don't want to lose the chance to get deer. And then tonight I'll look it up in the rules, make sure. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And so he's like, well, I said, how about this? How about tomorrow? If we come out and we don't see any deer for a little while, then you can try to shoot a squirrel. He's like, okay. So day 2 of hunting, we'd been sitting there a little while, and no deer, and he's seeing squirrels. He's like, Dad, can I shoot a
I
squirrel
love
now?
this.
He just has
I'm
an
like,
itch.
All right, if you want to. It's like, and there's one. And the ravine that we're in does have a sort of a crude stairs that come down, and there's a 2x4 sort of railing.
Okay.
And a squirrel jumps on that railing and starts running up the railing about 15 yards away from us. And he looks at it, and the squirrel stops momentarily. He stands up, he draws back, and he shoots it right in the head. And he gets his first squirrel.
That's awesome.
Wow.
And he's so excited, he goes and we got the photo, he's got this squirrel on his arrow and everything. And then he's like, Dad, do you want to try to shoot a squirrel? And all I'm thinking is, I'm not sure I can make that shot.
Yeah.
So I was like, Eli, I'm going to save it for a deer. I don't want to scare away any deer,
Yeah.
I left it at that. I need a bigger target than this. But so he did. That was his first. So ironically, in a way, he did end up getting a squirrel first.
Yeah.
And he immediately processed that too. He tanned that little hide or whatever
Yeah.
he did.
Oh,
Nice,
awesome.
He did
nice.
the whole thing. We ate the meat, everything that we could do. And, at that point, it was really clear, okay, he's ready. He's ready for a deer. Well, in our mind.
As ready as we can
As
be.
ready as we're gonna
Absolutely,
be.
yeah.
There's a lot of those preliminary questions, right? So Jordan's class on field dressing showed me that he was comfortable with processing an animal and being around an animal. And he really loved the making steaks out of the meat. It's like that's still one of his favorite things. And then getting up there and just being out there and what's that going to be like. And then he gets this squirrel and he's even more excited.
So you were out for 4 weekends?
Well, we were out for 4 weekends before we realized, okay, this whole tree stand thing right where it's at is killing our chances. Like, we are right on top of what we're trying to shoot, and it just,
Yeah.
and
It's not.
the wind
Silhouetted
swirling and all this,
Yeah, ravines are hard to hunt anyway. They
Yeah,
are.
so we just abandoned that. I had a trail camera down there, so I knew there were deer coming through all the time. They were just never there when we were there, right? And
That's the
it
story.
became obvious it was us, right? And so another friend told me stories about his brother-in-law or something like that who was hunting on his land and was always on his phone and not really paying attention and missing the deer and all this kind of stuff, and made me think we really need to be a little more careful. So we thought, well, let's build a blind. And we had an old shed that had been ripped down, so there was a bunch of random old shed boards laying there. So we just quickly made a little deck and made a little ramshackle blind on the side of the hill. And for the first time, sitting in that blind, we actually heard deer coming.
Hey.
But got to maybe, I don't know, I couldn't quite see them yet. And then I heard kind of noises, and they turned around and went the other way.
Yep.
And then that was when I started to think, wait, what? And then I started to think about the wind direction and
Yeah.
everything. And so we started reinforcing the blind, too, to block the wind and everything. And I think the next week we had it a little bit better. And the same thing, this time I actually saw their legs through the trees. They got a little closer, but same thing. They stopped. They kind of, I don't know if they were sniffing us out or what it was, and then they turned around and went the other way. And finally, the last week, I kind of battened down the head. We put some old tarp around it or something like that, and we got the first deer to come in after that. And I'll tell the story. So one of the things about this is the question was, who's going to shoot the first deer? Is it going to be Eli? Because he's the one that wants to do all this, or what? So I asked him. I just wanted to make sure. I said, Eli, do you want to shoot the first deer? And I said it in a way that I thought would sound appealing because honestly, I was hoping he'd say yes. Because I didn't know, back to my shooting my bird when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I was not sure what's going to happen if I'm drawn back and trying to shoot. Am I going to be able to do this? And he said, no, Dad, I think you should take the first one so I can see how it's done. And I was thinking, well, who's going to show me how it's done, So,
Like, I thought you were the expert.
it's like he was quickly becoming the expert. So I was up, and this first doe came in. And just to describe the experience, I had binoculars there, and she comes in, and I'm looking at her, I'm like, oh, okay. And he's like, looking at me like, Dad, okay, this is...
Eli's egging you on.
Yeah, it's like this is
come on.
time to go, Dad. And I frankly just couldn't believe it. We'd been out there for so long, seeing nothing, being like they clearly were onto us the whole time. Like, and I couldn't believe, like I'm figuring she's got to know I'm here. Like, look at this. She's looking at it. And in fact, this is the way I experienced it. It's like she looked at me and had this look on her face like, are you going to shoot me or what?
Oh,
wow.
wow.
Like, come on, here I am. This is your chance now, right? So I prepared myself and everything. I'm just hoping, for a good shot. And I take that first shot, and it was like the ideal shot. She went down, 15 yards away. She was gone quick. Eli was so excited in the moment. We knew it was a good hit, and he was like, Dad, and he gave me this big hug, and then completely surprised me. He says, Dad, I was praying for you. And I'm like, what now? He's like, I was praying while you were taking the shot that you would have a good clean shot,
That's awesome.
good kill shot. And I chills just kind of went through my spine. It's like he spontaneously was brought to this prayer because of how focused he was on this experience and on wanting to, have a clean kill of this animal, and that, so that it would not suffer, or suffer as little as possible. So I couldn't believe that. Like that was pretty overwhelming. So that moment of figuring out what's going to happen. I had this.
Slows down.
It does.
Yeah.
And I had this idea of all the things that are going through your mind as you're taking responsibility. I'm taking the life. And then I had this profound experience of words like gratitude. I felt ever after that, I am so much more tuned in and caring about deer. Like everywhere I go.
You're connected now.
I am. I'm looking around and I'm looking and wondering about the habitat there, and I bet there's a deer right there.
Yeah.
There's something about being, you said connected to these other animals, that you're in the role of predator, that you're doing something that humans have done for eons, for as long as there have been humans, this act of hunting. And I've become more and more fascinated by that. So like one other example, we're a very outdoorsy family. Hunting had not been part of the mix, but all kinds of other stuff was in there. I used to teach rock climbing and all kinds of exciting stuff, right? And we finally drew permits for the Olympic National Park, the Pacific coastline, when it's 26-mile hike up the Pacific coast. And we're like, oh my gosh, we were excited. It's been years we've been waiting for this. And, you're hiking the shoreline and there's whale bones, and like we're finding bear tracks in the sand and bear scat, and we're camping on the beach.
That's cool.
We even found like a bottle full of messages. People made messages in a bottle, threw it out in the ocean. It had been working its way down the coastline. We found this, and it was like people's wishes for life and stuff.
Yeah.
So we wrote our wishes on the bottle and threw the bottle back out into the ocean, and all this kind of thing. So extraordinary, like trip of a lifetime kind of thing. But nonetheless, we're hiking along, and I just had this feeling by comparison to the hunting we've been doing in Ohio, and I wondered what Eli was thinking. So I said, Eli, this is a pretty awesome trip, isn't it? We're seeing like incredible stuff, doing all this, like best backpacking ever. I said, how would you compare this backpacking trip on the Olympic coastline with our hunting in Ohio? And he paused for a second, and he said, well, Dad, I feel like there's something missing. Like, honestly, I mean, it seems funny to say it, he said, but it's like, I feel sort of like just like we're tourists, like we don't belong. And I said, Eli, that's how I'm feeling too. Like, I don't know what it is. Loving that experience. It was great. I'm not going to say I would take that hike again if I had the chance. But having then hunted by then and experiencing that connection and becoming a part of the ecosystem such that I'm now in a role of predator, and the life force of these other animals, or however you want to describe it, is something that is part of what I'm engaging with in a way that if you're not hunting, you just don't know what that is.
It's hard to explain to people.
It is. And so that kind of stuff has stuck in my mind, and maybe stuck in my heart, I'd even say.
Absolutely.
It just it wasn't what I was expecting. Those are the things I guess I didn't expect about it, was this kind of reverent piece, this part of my heart that opens up, this different dimension or this depth of connection to the natural world.
It seemed, in my experiences with taking a lot of new hunters and just my own personal hunting history, it really threw me into a conservation mindset, much more so than I ever thought was possible. So I manage properties for the opportunity to be able to harvest specifically deer and turkey. But I mean, I'm constantly, if I'm not doing it, I am thinking about it. There's no two things about that, and trying to always improve habitat to benefit. I mean, I am beyond excited when I get trail camera photos of turkey poults. Like, we've had a good spring. We've got turkeys for tomorrow. That warms my heart. And then you see twin fawns. Yeah. We're going to be okay for this year, and we're going to be okay for next year. So it will get into your blood system, and it stays there.
I'm still just, I guess I'm wrapping my first decade as a hunter, and that's exactly been my experience. I watch the trail camera. Thinking,
Christmas morning.
Are there going to be deer this year? Yeah. See what's coming and just seeing what's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing how it captures my imagination.
And you get, I just this weekend pulled trail camera photos, and it's always amazing what you get. And I've been doing this for quite a while, and for the first time ever, on 2 different occasions, got an owl.
Oh, awesome.
At night on trail camera. And it's like, I've never even had that before, you know? And it's like just, it gives you a connection as I'm sitting in a living room on a couch watching that, of being connected to the outdoors through, through your computer. But it kind of puts you into that place, and there's something to it.
See, this is where I think my experience on that first time I took a doe, the next morning I had a meeting, kind of an early morning meeting, and we stayed up all night. We stayed up till midnight, processed that deer.
Yeah, it was a whole family affair.
It was like a 3-generation kind of thing.
At the house?
So we did it all right there. We'd had this moment of silence, of reverence and thanks for what had happened, and then we kind of got to work, and we're watching videos and stuff, trying to figure out how to do this.
Tell me my training wasn't that bad.
Well, it was reinforcing. What did Jordan say?
Yeah.
I was more concerned in the class. After all that, I was like, I should take this class again, because now I know the right questions.
Like a refresher.
Yeah, now I really know what I should be asking, right?
How have you been able to take your experience learning how to hunt into your career? Have you been able to mentor others? Like, where has it taken you from that moment on?
It's a funny thing with my teaching, and I teach a course on religion and environmental values in America, kind of an environmental ethics course.
Yeah.
And I will say, I'm still kind of a newbie hunter, and I will still say I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm doing ethical experiments a little bit. Like, I'm not sure I know enough answers yet to be the guy teaching about this.
Right.
So I've always been not sure whether I'm bringing this into my class, but it's my students that bring it into the class.
Right.
So I'll have discussion sections in that class. In particular, we have an animal ethics week, and I'll have a hunter and a vegan sitting next to each other. And that's some of my proudest moments in the classroom was in it. And I'll tell you what happened. Both times this particularly happened. One was a semester where a student, he had grown up hunting with his dad, and he described for his fellow students the first time he got a deer and how his dad instructed him how to be respectful of the deer and how to give thanks for the life of that deer. And I tell you, just about everybody in that room was on the edge of some kind of important thought or feeling about that.
I think being able to provide a place where people can have open dialogue respectfully
right. And that's
is huge.
Yeah. So here's this vegan sitting next to him, and you're thinking, uh-oh, what comes next?
Right.
What came next was the vegan and the hunter walked out of class that day feeling like they had more in common than everybody else. And it's like because they both care so much about the ethics of what's going on with animals. Mm-hmm. And the vegan did not realize that the hunter cared that much too until she heard the stories of the hunter. And the guy that the next semester I had talked about how he filled his freezer and the freezer of some of his neighbors who need help getting food. And he'll harvest an extra deer for them. And same thing happened, like this profound sort of understanding and respect happened.
A mutual respect.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I see that in my own approach to people ask me about hunting. My boys too. Like you get a little bit savvy about whether you tell people you're a hunter or not. It's becoming more and more. I got the hat here, hunting for conservation. It's like I wear clothing now that maybe suggests I'm a hunter a little bit more, but it's still not part of my elevator speech in the first 30 seconds to be like,
No.
oh, I'm a hunter by the way. I kind of we're gonna figure out who I'm talking to before I mention that I'm a hunter. But even with people who are maybe anti-hunting, I now feel like it's the best conversation I can possibly have. Because that next morning after my first doe, I had a meeting with a colleague who turns out to have been vegan. I didn't know that. And I was like, hey, by the way, before we start our meeting, I just had something very significant happen to me last night. I took a deer, and then she's like, well, I'm vegan. And then we talked for 2 hours about what that all meant. And I just think the conversation is there waiting to be had. Because when people really do respect something for good reasons, and you take the time to listen to other people who also
Exactly.
respect things for good reasons, there's a lot more common ground there than
Absolutely.
people realize.
Yes.
So I've been fascinated by that. And I guess kind of what happened, I got drawn in, invited to join the Worthington Deer Advisor, or the Deer Task Force. So deer in urban areas, right, as we all know, it's like you're not allowed to hunt in a lot of these areas, or it's very limited. And there's no predators left other than
Right.
cars.
Yeah,
And,
Ford, Chevy, and Dodge.
yeah, and you're looking at deer numbers, and then you start looking at biological diversity and plant species and what's being lost because there's so much deer browse, and people don't even realize, right? But at Worthington, you reached a point where people who'd been lifelong gardeners writing in and saying, I've been gardening for 40 years, and I've always gardened, you know, and I like deer, whatever, but for the last 5-10 years, I can't plant anything. Even
Right.
deer-resistant species, and they're coming in and eating it. This is just out of balance. So I got pulled into the Deer Task Force, partly 2 reasons. Number one, I think somebody knew that I was an urban archery deer hunter, and so I had a little bit of experience with understanding how that works. But
Yeah.
I also teach a capstone sustainability course at Ohio State, and my students will go out and do community surveys and things like that. I basically bring a research team with
I
me.
was going to say.
That's
I'm pretty
the-
sure that's really why I was at that.
Sounds like a good reason.
That's
no?
where the theory meets the practice.
Yeah, the city knew that they might get a little bit more out of it if they invited me in. So, yeah, and so my students did spend 2 semesters doing 2 different surveys, trying to find out what the Worthington community thought about deer. And that was fascinating to me because I'll say that the stuff we've been talking about here, this deep level of respect and the connection, that is not the substance of most of the conversation
No.
around deer
I can
control and deer
imagine.
management
No.
in Worthington, Ohio. And I keep waiting for the conversation to go deeper. I keep waiting for the people who oppose deer management, who don't want to see any deer killed. I keep waiting for their let's all open up and talk about why is that?
Yeah.
What are I want to hear about the values of why you believe that is the case. But everybody's always just sort of fighting against some other ideology, it feels like. The resistance in Worthington to managing deer, because our survey showed that 75% of Worthington residents
We're in favor.
wanted to see deer numbers go down because they've just seen too many issues with deer. Population's too high for our tolerance socially. 71% wanted city funds to be used to do that reduction deer. So it's almost like a mandate. So we weren't looking like there's going to be a lot of people against this, but we knew that there was a 15, 20% that, were really against the idea of removing deer. And we had so many public forums and so many places where we invited people to talk about and ask questions. And I kept every meeting we had of the task force, I'm like, oh, there's the person that's going to come and
There's
say,
the
don't
one.
kill my deer.
Yeah.
I don't think killing animals is appropriate, something like that. And instead, that person usually is an older woman, and I thought she was going to be speaking up for the deer. And instead, she'd come and say, the deer have been killing my plants,
Yeah.
or I was attacked by a doe.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable, the kind of conflict that we're having. So there just really wasn't much of that conversation. And I think that conversation would do a lot of people a lot of good. But there was, when it finally came down to it and went to city council, a couple of lawyers in the community showed up to speak against deer management and tried to raise the specter of liability and a bunch of other things. And so I talked to that woman afterwards. And here's interesting. I didn't tell her, hey, I'm a deer hunter, but I was on the deer task force, and she had come to speak against it. And I told her about my previous job. I used to work for National Wildlife Federation in a Learn to Fish program. And the point was connecting people to nature. And she said, oh, yeah, that's what I mean about deer. Have you seen how kids respond when they see the deer in Worthington? They stop, and they're really excited. And I said, yeah, exactly. And I guess my experience with other hunters is that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with hunting them. In fact, that level of awe and engagement only goes up when you're involved in the pursuit of hunting.
It's proper management of a resource, and you're trying to reduce a herd that is unhealthy,
Yeah.
as opposed to get rid of
Yeah.
deer, and those are 2
Yeah.
very different things. So, but this has also led you held the cap up, but CLFT. I'll start with the acronym. I'll let you give a little shameless little pitch of CLFT, because that's a very big deal, and you're part of that now.
Yeah, Conservation Leaders for Tomorrow is CLFT. And it's normally what it is a week-long program that mostly is doing education for agency staff around the country, Fish and Wildlife Service and other agencies. Because over time, since starting in the 1980s, I think it was, people started to notice that used to be that most agency staff grew up hunting and fishing and all this. But by the 80s, that demographic was changing, and half the people going into agencies didn't have any background with that. And there's a critical role that hunting plays in conservation, not just the kind of ethics we're talking about, like when you're a hunter and you become convinced of the need to take good care of habitat and care for the animals, partly because you're involved in that, right? It's not just that. It's the tax on ammo sales and other funding mechanisms that fund agencies. Ohio gets, $13 million a year from Pittman-Robertson funds. And that's something that has always supported the conservation work that happens all across the country. So if you don't understand how essential sort of the whole hunting culture and the way that hunting happens and the taxes that are put on hunting and things like that and the way that serves conservation, you're kind of missing something, right? So that CLT has been trying to educate agency staff about that legacy. Hunting for conservation is kind of like the 3-day condensed version of that some universities are doing. So we started that for Ohio
And we're
State.
seeing that in universities across America now as a class, which I wish I'd like to go back to university
Right,
for
I didn't
that.
have that class. I was in hockey though, so we
I
were
think
all
Clint said it
hunting hillbillies
best when we had our deer biologist, Clint McCoy, on, and we asked him at the end, what do you want to tell the folks listening to this? And he said, keep doing what you're doing. Keep harvesting deer. And this is a professional that needs deer to still have a profession. And he's saying, get out there and keep hunting because the herd needs it. The herd health needs it. So there's a lot of moving pieces with it. That's for sure.
I guess one thing we've got a lot of how this has affected you. How did it work out for Eli?
Yeah.
Not to spend too much time, but we gotta get. I need some closure for the young man. I mean, this guy is a kid after my own heart who wanted to hunt, had that drive, and how's he doing?
So I've given a talk at a couple different places. One was for the hunter education volunteers in Ohio.
Okay.
And I kind of told my story there. And Eli came to that.
Oh.
He arrived a little bit late. He was standing kind of in the back of the room. And so as I was telling some of this story, I was pointing back, and there he is right there. Afterwards, I couldn't even get near him because everybody wanted to talk to him, like, well, good on you, young man, kind of thing. But here's what Eli would say. And Eli is an avid outdoors enthusiast. He's doing rock climbing stuff I never dreamed of doing, and he's a triathlete and all this.
Oh, wow.
Okay, if you ask him what's his favorite outdoor activity, it's hunting and fishing.
Yeah.
That's a
down.
win. We'll take it.
Yeah, not
he's-
even a contest.
He's added some species. We shared a field and did a dove hunt.
Oh, good.
One time. So
That was the other Learn to Hunt. So we then enrolled in the Dove Hunt, Learn to Hunt program and enjoyed that. And then Bob Gates has taken us out.
Yeah,
So
which
we kinda-
shameless plug on that. You can find that information, Abby. Where can you find more on Learn to Hunt programming in the state
You
of
can
Ohio?
go on wildohio.gov and check out our schedule of events, and you will see different classes happening all over the state of Ohio.
Geographically located across
Geographically
the state
located
of
and
Ohio.
within season.
So there you
We're
go.
getting ready for the seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And also because everybody was assigned a mentor.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I think was really helpful about that program.
I
in
think having a
particular.
mentor is pretty essential.
Yeah.
It's essential for success. What's interesting about your guys' story, now, granted, you had people you were leaning on, but when I sit here listening to it, it's like you guys were each other's mentor.
Yeah.
You were helping each other out. I love that he was like, I'd rather you shoot that first deer so I can see how it's done. That's great.
Well, and so as a proud father, like I'm still always impressed at what a good shot Eli is. And I ask him questions about how I can be a better shot kind of thing. But probably the proudest moment for me was Eli started inviting his friends to come deer hunt with him. And I watched him kind of go through the same process that he and I went through together with some of his friends as
That's
he's
awesome.
drawn them in.
Did you guys go through Hunter Ed together?
Yeah, the online course kind of thing for Hunter Ed. And you're right. Yeah, we were kind of piggybacking. We were both doing it, but we both had busy schedule kind of thing. But it worked out. Yeah, so we were getting through that. Or I'm trying to think. Well, because I probably did a apprentice license or something.
I think we did the apprentice with Eli, and
I
you
think
had done
so.
the
I'm
course.
pretty sure that
and
first
then
year or
it
two,
was.
yeah.
We were still in the dad mode of
yeah.
how far into this are we going?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Going
So
off the deep
what about
end.
this fall? Are you going to stay inside Ohio, or are you going to stretch your legs with Eli and cross state lines?
Well, a little bit of, so I will say this. Eli has decided he doesn't like hunting in the backyard anymore because it's just the backyard, Dad.
Stretch his legs.
And honestly, so we bought the house from my folks during COVID. They
Yep.
downsized, bought a house somewhere else. And so Eli's bedroom is now literally, his bed is like 15 feet from the blind on this. He
Yeah.
can literally roll out of bed and into the blind. And there's something about that. It just doesn't do it for him. For me, I can't tell you. That is my happy place.
Hunt smarter or not?
I get out there
Harder.
I get out there, grade papers. I
Yeah.
I don't need to be hunting at all. But to go into that space, into that blind, it's
You get
beautiful
that
to me,
brain
right?
shift.
Eli has decided he'd rather be on public land, and so some of our public land around here is now where he deer
Awesome.
hunts.
Great.
Out of state, so Jordan knows we went on an elk hunt a couple of years back when Eli was still youth age. Borrowed a elk rifle from
Yeah,
Jordan, in
yeah.
fact, and we're not successful in getting an elk, but we came close to having the opportunity for a shot, and that's still and I do plan to go out this fall.
Great.
Met an additional friend and have been invited to join them in elk camp, and maybe Eli's coming with me. I mean, he's got some classes at Ohio State that he needs to take, but he's a senior, so we'll see how bad his senioritis is and whether he's going with me to
From a professor.
Yeah. Just being honest. I've just gathered that Greg is just
Humans
always
be
honest.
humans.
Yeah, so that's it. And then I went with Gabe Carnes. We went late season squirrel hunting in Michigan.
Okay.
Back
Okay.
in the
He
spring.
take the pup.
Yeah, he took his dog.
So for the folks watching and listening to this, we are going to have Gabe on later this year, and we may even have a special guest come in with
I'm
Gabe.
excited about Gabe's
Four
episode.
legs.
So
Maybe.
4 legs.
Maybe.
Four legs.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, Gabe's incredible. I tell everybody about Gabe. It's like he's been hunting his whole life, but he's a landscape ecologist who did his dissertation on deer habitat.
Yeah.
Anytime I basically have a question about deer, I
just
call
ask it.
Gabe. But he's got this squirrel dog, and it was the most fun just watching him interact with that dog.
Yeah.
He'd set her all up. Okay, you ready? Go find me one. And she'd just.
Before we wrap up, do you have any last words of wisdom, final thoughts for anybody who maybe is wanting to dip their toe in, trying to figure out if they want to
Or the
try
kids are
hunting?
dragging them right around.
Or,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would just say go for it. Don't be afraid to give this a try and take advantage of what resources exist, whether that's a learn to hunt program that you can find, but talk to and ask everyone you can think of for help. Because my experience with hunters has been that people do want to pass on the legacy,
Right.
and people do want to share their knowledge, right? So it's not that hard to find somebody who can help you out. And then part of the beauty of it, part of what's so engaging about it, is there's so many things to figure out. Like some of it's just the logistics, and some of it's this interaction with the
absolutely.
animal, and some of it's being good with your aim, and some of it's just understanding the
some
regulations.
of it's just getting to the tree stand.
Yeah, figuring out where the heck you're going to go, or dealing with the weather and all that, right? So there's all
Yeah.
these levels, and if you're someone who's already really experienced in the outdoors, some of those things won't be a big deal to you.
Yeah.
But if you're someone who's interested in getting some meat in your freezer and you also don't have a background in the outdoors, well, there's a number of levels. But you know what? People have been doing this as long as they've been people. And I guess one of the things I've discovered is that I think one of the reasons that hunting is so engaging is because I have all sorts of senses and abilities that I never used until I hunted
Yeah.
that are like evolved into me as a human being. It's like if you go through hike the Appalachian Trail, your feet will grow into like hobbit feet. You'll be 2 sizes larger. You have to get new shoes, bigger shoes, because we have like 106 muscles in our foot, more than any other part of our body, but we don't ever use them because we're walking on sidewalks or we're sitting in chairs and all that. But if you're actually out hiking on trails, suddenly you start using all those muscles, your feet get bigger,
Yep.
and your body knew how to do that all along, but you never engaged it. And I feel like that's what's going on when I hunt.
I feel like it engages a part of your brain that we don't necessarily use on the daily in our world of screens and fast pace, being able to slow down and be patient and
Yeah,
Well, you're
slow.
always learning.
Yeah.
Just when you've got it figured out, turkey hunting in particular, just when you get those things figured
Always
out,
learned.
they're going to let
Always
you know
bring
that you
turkey.
are
Gotta
use your
far.
Always bring
imagination. You gotta
turkey.
figure
Yeah,
so much out.
absolutely.
He always thinks about turkeys.
But it's also whole body, whole being. It's
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
everything. It's like physical and mental
Yep.
and strategic and all this stuff at once. So it's just so engaging. So I think that's it. And the other piece, the last little piece I always say, and this is just me, the sort of environmental ethicist, it's back to the hunting ethics piece. I really do think my friend, his name's Jim Tantillo, did his dissertation on hunting ethics, and he started out with the intent. He thought he was going to make an argument against the need for hunting in the modern day, because why would you need to go kill an animal when you can get protein at the grocery store, right? Mm-hmm. After 2 years of studying it and reading and building his argument, he started to think, wait a second, I'm not sure this is the conclusion I can come to. And he also said, I shouldn't judge it if I don't try it. And he found a whole other bunch of literature, and he ended up, in the end, and he extended his studies. He's got the largest library of any person I know.
Oh, wow.
The guy is so well read on every ethical anything. But his argument was that hunting has a value societally, sort of like Greek tragedy. Why would you make a tragic play about tragedy? He said, because life has tragic dimensions. Right? All life lives off the death of other
Unavoidable.
life. Right? Whether you eat plants or whether you eat animals or whatever you eat, some entity, some being that was alive in a way has died for you to consume that. And you can ignore that, or you can let a grocery store wrap that in plastic and styrofoam or something like that and just kind of blink, get it. Or you can face that fully, and you can take responsibility for that and try to do that in as meaningful and as responsible and as honorable and respectful a way as possible. And that moral activity of navigating all of those choices, all of that responsibility, is a way to grow morally. Right? That was Jim's argument, is that there is moral value to hunting. It makes people morally
I love
better.
it. It's awesome.
And I love it. And not only that, it's exciting too. So
Greg, I can't thank you enough for coming in. Always good to see you.
pleasure's all mine.
Hope you have a good, successful fall for whatever it is that you are pursuing, chasing, and trying to put into the freezer, which is a lot, I understand. So
Thank you, sir.
absolutely. So thanks for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed our episode with Greg and his journey as a late onset hunter. Don't forget to subscribe to the Wild Ohio podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and or on our YouTube channel. Tell your friends, tell your family, and in the meantime, we hope to see you outside.
Thanks, Greg.